I know it exists. I know that's a rule. I mean, I don't know why they call them rules, to be honest. It's like...
Suggestion of thirds.
Yeah, suggestion of thirds, exactly. Trick of thirds. I don't fucking know. Welcome back to Waiting to Dry. Minisodes. This is Josh Lawyer.
I'm Sergio Lopez.
Hell yeah. As you all might know, the minisodes we try to tackle a topic.
Yep.
So this week is... No, don't worry about it, Sergio. I'm nailing it.
Let's compare. Oh, it's not even loud enough anyway.
So I win. Composition.
So what made you decide to want to tackle this as a topic?
I don't know. I just... we've been doing very, specific topics. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to see how it would go if we took something kind of, vague.
Okay.
I've been wanting to talk about it for a while, but it seemed too artsy for our art podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And our minisode seemed more of a spot to kind of do something like this.
Okay. So, yeah, you wanted to tackle it in more like a what is it or how you...
Yeah, more of an art talk kind of way. Where people are like... what art words and stuff. You know what I mean? Rendering, whatever that means.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know how to get this bad boy started.
How do you think about it? Do you think about it in formal terms?
Shit, I guess Mello's joining us. We'll see if
Special guest Mello.
Come on, come and sit.
No.
He's
confused at what's going on here.
All right, we want to pause.
Yeah.
Were we talking about something?
Oh, yeah. Composition, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you think about it? Do you think about it in any sort of formal terms, or you just kind of go at it more intuitively?
I'm probably much more of an intuitive composition. The way I think about it, if I had to sum it up, would be something kind of placing things in the best possible way to get the best results.
Right.
That's how I think about it.
Okay.
Pretty much. I don't know how spot on or whatever that is in the collegiate world, but and it's also lighting stuff and things like that.
Yeah. Do you think of it more in terms of shape design, or is there something else you're more considering?
I think of it as a light blanket over the whole thing of your piece. It's kind of I think there's a big part of it that's shape design. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's how those shapes interact with each other,
right,
based upon how something might be darker or lighter, or I don't know, warmer or colder or shinier and duller or whatever the fuck.
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
So it's all all of those kind of things put together in an arrangement that is interesting.
Yeah. Those different things you're mostly thinking about, even if they're contrasting, how they still fit together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a weird puzzle, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely how I tend to think about it, too. I don't know, do you pay attention to stuff like rule of thirds, for example, those little, rules?
No, not really.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's in my work or something like that sometimes.
Yeah.
But I'm not intentionally doing stuff like that. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I know it exists. I know that's a rule.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they call them rules, to be honest. It's
suggestion of thirds.
Yeah. Suggestion of thirds, exactly. Trick of thirds. I don't fucking know. Whatever you want to call it. But,
right.
These rules I think are silly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't really follow anything like that. One of the big breakthroughs I had with composition was actually like I did some mushrooms for the first time a little bit ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I set myself up in a way to, well, I did them at home.
Okay.
And I have a shitload of artwork.
Uh-huh.
And one of the cool things about that drug, not saying kids should go and do it, but I mean, do it if you want, whatever. I'm not your dad.
He'll never be your dad either.
You don't know that. But it makes you like hyper focus on certain things, and it shows you how like you have this way of seeing things where you notice like the beauty and like the simple things, kind of, you know what I mean? But like at a level where you're, I don't know, that's just an interesting point of view, and you really can pay attention to darks versus lights as well, and like how interesting they can interact. And so I just sat around for like 3 hours looking at my walls and like other stuff. And it also makes you, at least at that moment, it made me very aware of perspective, like in the room I'm in. And then how to play around with that to make things interesting as well. I don't know why I brought that up. What were we talking about?
Was it shape design at all, or?
Maybe, God, I had a point I was trying to make. It wasn't to do drugs. It was something else. God damn it. Sorry, I'm a bit like the fucking smoke in the air.
Oh, I know.
And all that shit. It's like I feel like my brain is going at half speed right now.
Yeah, me too. I'm like sluggish all day today. Yeah.
I know. Fucking fires. I swear to God, I'm so sick and tired of this shit.
I know.
But yeah.
Do mushrooms. Learn composition.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a weird thing because like we did them again in Oregon.
Oh yeah.
And MJ, like I was trying to explain it to MJ, and it like kind of clicked a little bit for her as well. Like explaining like how you can kind of like hyper focus and like make a scene, and then you can like slightly move and adjust the scene.
Okay.
Based on like where you want the placement of things, and like how the darkness can change the environment. Right. It becomes this cool thing where you can really kind of focus on how to highlight certain things and how to build upon those things. So the body of work I'm working on now all happened after I did the mushrooms, and I was like, I think I figured something out and I feel like in my work now compared to right before it, I like, for me, I see like this huge change in how I'm doing, like building my composition. And then people keep saying, why do you paint so much dark shit now? I'm like, I don't know, mushrooms. And I don't think it's that dark. I think it's happy.
They just mean like dark, actual, like compared, like dark colors and stuff.
I think they mean, well, I know we've gotten, I forget his name. One guy that's our listeners mentioned how like it seems like I'm painting way more darker subject matter. But to me, I'm still trying to tackle like dark comedy in my work, so it's kind of a bit of that, you know, like figuring out how to be funny while seeming serious or dark or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with this. Let's get back to focusing on composition. But yeah, so how do you go about like say if you're working, I mean, is it different based on, like, obviously you have figurative stuff and then you have plein air stuff. Right. Is there two different ways you look at it?
For the most part, I would say so. Like when I'm doing landscape work, I definitely start with the rules kind of in mind. But they're like different things that I notice I deviate from pretty quickly, like rule of thirds and stuff.
What are like, is there like a main kind of, like if you had like a set of rules that you stick to and then I guess deviate from at some point? Right. Is there a good starting point, you would say?
Yeah. Focal point usually tends to be around those points that the rule of thirds ends up at. And I see... like I adjust to see like if that actually works for what I want or not. And then normally when I'm painting, like when I'm doing a plein air thing, I will probably put the focal point somewhere in those like quadrants. But when I take photos for reference and I try to do that, I notice that I don't normally like how it looks there. And I don't know if it's just because the aspect ratio of the camera is different than my panel usually. So it doesn't always work out that way. But that tends to be just like my one little jump off point. Other than that, I don't follow any compositional rules that are too formal. Like I don't normally like follow like golden ratio or anything like that. If that happens to work out that way, that's like purely by accident.
That's because you don't like to turn lead into gold, bro.
Yeah.
Wake up, man.
Lead paint into gold.
It's alchemy, baby.
That's what that's what we do as artists.
Yeah.
But yeah, beyond that, comparing that to figurative work, I've noticed that I like to create more sort of like flattened compositions, if that makes sense, with figures. Like that's probably a lot of where like the pattern work tends to come from.
Right.
Just making 2D space out of a 3D subject. And I'm not really sure why I don't normally like to do that with landscapes and stuff. Like I'm usually trying to do the opposite. I'm usually trying to create depth with my compositions in landscape and flattening with figurative work.
That is kind of weird. I've never thought about that with your work.
Yeah.
Yeah, like your work, your like landscape work is like so like atmosphere heavy.
Right.
And then your figurative work is like almost like it's like it's like a sheet and a human, or I don't know how to explain it, but it's almost like a sheet. Like it's almost like you're paying attention to the surface of the panel or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I don't normally do that in my landscape work. I think I've played around with that here and there a bit, but yeah, for some reason my mind just kind of switches when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly where, but I've been trying to, like, I've noticed I've been doing that a little bit. Like, I can tell that in my mind, my brain's starting to kind of veer toward that with the still life stuff I'm doing, all the food paintings. Like I'm noticing that I'm more thinking about the 2D composition of it, like how I can arrange everything around the subject in more of a interesting
Like
shape
graphic.
design. Yeah. Not even just so much graphic, although that is a big part of it. But yeah, I don't know if it's just like when I focus on one object, everything around it becomes more of a pattern to me.
Right.
Whereas with an environment, it all just, I like become more aware of making the space seem more like there's more of a depth there than there really is. Yeah, that's one of those things I'm still trying to figure out for myself. why I'm more drawn to that. Beyond that, like compositional things, I mean, there's other little rules that I try not to do too much, like tangents and stuff like that. Not putting too much things that will lead your eye away from your area of focus and all that. Just like little things to avoid in that way, where you don't want something too distracting in the corner and stuff. Those are more like things I kind of deal with after I place everything down, and then just kind of troubleshoot it from there. And
this is like a overall rule, or are you saying, okay?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm the opposite on that like whole tangent thing. I'm naturally like, how do I make the viewer battle between like seeing the main figure and like what else?
Oh, really?
That's like a thing I'm always trying to figure out, is like how to compete with the main figure.
Yeah.
In a way that's interesting.
Yeah, there's some illustrators that used to do that a lot too. Like they would purposely use tangents to create tension in their work. So yeah, I mean, that's another way of going about it for sure.
Yeah, but there's always those people with like the slightly wonky eye.
Yeah.
And it's like all my efforts are for nothing.
Yeah. Like, it looks perfect to me.
Like, I'm keeping attention on both things. There's no tension here.
Yeah, exactly.
There is.
Just make two paintings like side by side to each other.
But yeah, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think a big reason why I wanted to talk about composition was I feel like it's like one of those like I feel like it's one of those things that is kind of a little bit like I don't know if mysterious is the right word. It's just like I feel like it's hard to click in a little bit.
It's hard to explain, I think.
Yeah. It's almost like for instance when I did a photo shoot today, and a lot of times when you're photographing a model, at least for me, I'll have this idea of what I want to get as a photograph. And then she'll do the pose or whatever, and I'll take the picture from where I think is best, and then I'll a lot of times slide a little bit to the left, slide a little bit to the left, slide a little bit to the left, and then I might change my opinion on the pose. So I'm like, I want this, I don't know, I want her pose to kind of have some intention. And then I think, you know, because a lot of times I'm just like making up a pose, you know, like in my head, and then I'll draw it a lot of times just like this is kind of roughly what I want.
Do you show the model that?
Yeah. And a lot of times it'll veer from that because first of all, I do a lot of fucking side profiles if I'm doing that because they're easier for my brain to make up.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or even just like front. It's like
straight on.
Yeah. So then photographing, you can adjust slightly, and then you can find something more interesting while still holding like the intention of the pose. And that's how I feel about composition. It's like this, like to understand it is okay, but I think to get good at it, you have to like understand how to slightly adjust everything to create the best visual piece for what you intend. You know, that's how I think about it. So like I usually have like multiple kind of things happening in what I'm working on to build like this narrative.
Okay.
And so it's like a figure interacting with, I don't know, even like the horizon line or whatever, and you know, like something else or whatever in the piece to kind of explain whatever I'm trying to say. And so trying to figure out how to place those things correctly to get the most out of it can be just like the slightest change that can make a huge difference in how interesting it is. You know, I think it's easier to think about it in photography because when you're painting, it's already kind of like set.
Yeah.
So if you're like, it's like the difference if I'm shooting a pose that's supposed to be powerful, if I lower my stance, it makes the person seem taller.
Right.
You know, it's like that simple adjustment. And so when you paint it, it creates this composition that makes the person seem taller, which kind of means power or something like that. And then trying to figure out how to place that on a panel to keep that intention. You know, and then if I have things that interact with it, how to keep everything to match up to become, I don't know, whatever if your intention is to be pleasing to the eye, how do I cause that? If it's to be, you know, relaxing or easy or fucking build tension or whatever, how do I compose this so that it does what I want it to do?
When you think about like when all those sort of things come together, do you go through a lot of trial and error with that, like even after the shoot? Like,
yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean a lot of times I'll try to shoot multiple different models with one intention.
Oh, okay.
Because you rely on a model so much to deliver something that like it might not work, right, depending on the model. And then so that's like one step, and then hopefully you have if you can find the photo that you want. The way I think about it is, I don't know if it's weird or not, it's like a lot of ideas I keep in my head. I always feel like there's certain rappers that do this. They don't write their raps anymore, they just have them in their head. and then they go into the booth and then they say it, but it's like they kind of are like constantly repeating these ideas over and over to like where they're like figuring it out in their head, and then they kind of loosely have a direction and then they try to attack it.
Okay.
And I feel like that's a lot of how I go about creating my work. So I have like all these like ideas in my head, and they're slowly growing and becoming more and more like developed. And sometimes I'll write some stuff down. Yeah. But a lot of like the composition stuff is in my head of like, okay, I know like, and I'm going to write it down. I'm not going to like draw it out or, you know. Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, the piece I'm working on now is based off of old drawing a little bit. But for the most part, I don't draw it out. I just am thinking about like what I want, and I don't know how to go about doing that.
When you're thinking it out, are you already thinking about like how shapes are going to fit with each other?
Yeah, at least to a point. Yeah. And then there's always like an adjustment. I always kind of give myself a little bit of an ability to change ideas, or at least composition, not ideas, but the way I'm tackling it. Yeah. And then sometimes I fail, and then that's when you stop seeing a painting being done or something like that. Yeah. You know? Or, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, but you, especially with like your figurative stuff, a lot of it gets done on the tablet first, right?
Yeah. It depends really, but yeah, for the most part, I kind of think of it like, you know how, like back to the rapper thing, how some of them, like I've heard, I think Eminem sometimes does that where he, where he'll like kind of like mumble out like the kind of rhythm that he wants, and then fills in the words later.
Right. Yeah. A lot of like songwriters do that too. They'll have like the cadence and they'll be like la da 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 da. Yeah. We'll fill that in later.
Right. So yeah, in some ways I kind of think of it that way, where like I have sort of like the colors and shapes kind of in my head that I want to go for. Right. And then, yeah, it's a matter of just like plugging in all the different elements that fit it together. Right. But they almost never actually come out the way I actually like see them in my head at first. There's almost always a big difference between by the time I get to what I had in my head and what ends up being the painting. I don't know if it's like just the limitations of the reference I go for because I'm so reliant on it, or I just decide that, okay, what I see in reality is actually a lot more interesting to me than what I thought I had in my head.
Right. You don't think it's the opposite?
It can be for sure. And those are the paintings I end up not liking that much.
Yeah. So usually you're like more stoked off of the outcome.
Usually.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say so. Not always. I mean, I'd say it's about half and half, really.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's similar. I think the difference between how we kind of go about it might be based off of really how like for instance, because I'm more narrative driven, it's the determining factor for why the composition is set up the way it is. Like it is really like to drive the narrative.
Right, for sure.
So for you, it's interesting because it's like the building of composition.
It's more about, how the shapes are arranged for me, at least.
Right.
And not just like the actual like physical shapes of them, but like what those shapes actually contain become different things. So like I could consider like a big swatch of pattern as one shape. Right. And that becomes like a dominant part of the composition or whatever. Like they all just become like puzzle pieces, like you were saying before.
Right. And so for that is your intention. I know a big part of your intention is like beauty. I would assume a big part of it would be like interest, like how interesting it is. Right. Is there any other like real big driving factors to that?
When it comes to composition, I don't know. I mean, because beauty is such like a big like broad subject as well. Right. Like harmony becomes like a part of it, but that's kind of, to me, like a subset of beauty. So yeah, I would say more like, yeah, color harmony becoming like a big factor in it. Right. So all those different shapes, like how the colors of those shapes interact with each other becomes a big part of what I'm doing.
Does how would I explain? I don't know how. Maybe complexity or like technical show-offery. Is that a word?
Sure. I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, is that like a
like virtuosity? Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that become a driving factor at all?
It can be sometimes. Yeah. You mean like in the actual execution of these things, like how they're actually like painted?
Or even like I mean like figurative stuff, like the whole like pattern overlay. There is, I feel like, this ability to make the painting more intricate or complicated or something.
Yeah.
Is that ever a driving factor of like how you set up a piece? Like
oh yeah, for sure.
I only bring up this question because like there is something with composition where like it can go hugely in one direction of like, I mean, like Karl Dovsky is like a good example of like how complicated a piece can go, like the whole like maximalist or whatever.
Sure.
like fucking I don't know, dude that did Alien, whatever, I can't remember.
Oh yeah, Geiger.
Geiger, there you go. Or fucking those guys, like they go so like all like far one direction, you know, and then there's someone who can do something like very pulled back and like a simplistic, and like obviously those are two very different like driving forces for composition as far as like both can create something beautiful, but like but the way they tackle it is very different.
Yeah, for me, I tend to start more simple and then add things to add this complexity to it in the end.
Right.
So I will usually try and start with when I'm like actually composing things, like doing thumbnails or whatever. I'll start with pretty simple shapes to create the actual scene, and then go in there and add more complex things to it, whether it's like pattern or floral things or any sort of thing like that, to add whatever gives me the most opportunity to play with shapes and colors and texture and whatever to it, while still trying to keep that overall sense of shape and like that original simple composition.
Right.
So that's pretty much in a nutshell how I kind of go about studio paintings, at least.
Right. Nice. I don't know if we helped anyone at all with this one.
Well, we did a half hour.
Did you have any other like points you wanted to hit on as far as composition?
What would you say is like bad composition?
I think if it distracts from your intention.
Okay.
I think it's like when it becomes like the star of the show, kind of, in a way. I don't know.
Like the composition itself becomes more important than what you're trying to say.
Yeah, you know, I said like I feel like it's like a blanket over the thing. It's almost like the soundtrack to a movie. Do you know what I mean? Like, it helps you through the thing. But if you ever watch the fucking movie Suicide Squad, it's a real shit show of a movie. And all it is a shitty movie with like generic ass hype music. Of like, do you know what I mean? Like of like the most. It's like if you see like a football scene in a movie and they play "We Are the Champions" or some shit, or like, you know, like it's like so predictable, and that's what that movie is. That's where like it kind of pulls you out of it rather than helps the movie. It makes it shitty. Right, and so sometimes, like, you know, like I was saying, like if you lower the angle at which you shoot someone, they become more powerful or something in the shot.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, there's a point where like I think where that becomes like well, now we're just talking about how now the angle is so absurd that it's just about the composition at that point. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Rather than,
Okay.
at least to me, like I would prefer it being more subtle, and to deliver that point, you're taking the point and kind of making it about the angle rather than
Right. Okay.
So it's like something like that, where like your intention is getting lost by your, I don't know, obsession over the composition or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. Yeah. For me, I mean, I definitely agree with all that. And also for me, I would add that, yeah, when you add things into your composition that don't really belong there, or like misplaced in a way to make you distract from your intention, like you're saying, like if you're painting, I don't know, a figure in a forest, if it's like dappled light, and you make that, if there's like too much like dappled light or whatever, like really strong highlights in a corner of the painting that take away from the figure you're trying to look at.
Right.
To me, that would be bad, like badly composed.
Right.
Like, yeah, and you know, just any other example of that in a way.
Right. Yeah. I still haven't figured it out, but I remember, I think I talked about it on the podcast before, where I did like a figurative, or I just did a figure or a portrait, and I put dots in front of it.
Oh,
with like the idea of like, it was supposed to be chicken pox, you know, and so the idea was like, if the concept or whatever is chicken pox, and the dots are distracting,
yeah,
like, does that tackle the intention? With the idea that
but that one seemed like the intention was to distract, right? Yeah.
So yeah, because it's like, if someone has like a you know, acne or whatever it is, a lot of times people can't see past that. You know, I don't think chickenpox are that common anymore, but
No.
but yeah, so with that, like, you can use distraction as a tool, but
Right.
it has to be a part of the intention, and then I think that's when it's fine. But yeah, if you're distracting from your intention, for sure, it's like you're fucking up, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You paint that figure in the forest with chicken pox.
Yeah. Or you got like a bunch of fucking like super colorful backlit stuff, you know? And sometimes that becomes the star of the show, rather than like, you know, like you have the figure and they have like that blue light glowing on the, like, backlit on them. So then it's a cool effect, but then it becomes it almost like takes away from everything else in the painting.
Yeah.
You know? So you're
right.
like, all right, cool. Like, it's cool blue light, but like, that's that.
Right.
So I think that's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how I'm sure there's ways to work that into an intention, or if you just want it to be like, this is some cool shit,
Right.
then that's perfectly fine. But I think if your intention is something else, but you want to interject that because you think it's cool, that can be another distraction that's like pulls you away.
Right.
And is a misstep. Yeah, I'm sure there's a shitload of them. I still don't grasp perspective in a way that I think is like, I don't think I could utilize it as good as I wish I could.
Oh, interesting.
I think I know a couple little like things that I use, but I think it's one of those, like, I think that's one of the like the parts of my ability that I'm like, it seems like you can do some really cool things if I could grasp it better. But
Like what?
I just think like a figure, how you can adjust the height and of the way you view it, and it changes intention. I think with like let's say a doorway, for instance.
Okay.
Like if I place a person behind the doorway and they peek out like a Sergio or something.
Yeah.
then I can adapt. I don't mean peek out, but if there's a person outside in the other room, I can adapt that. Like like Kim Jong-il, for instance, right? Like he's a master of perspective.
Yeah.
And you can see how he can adapt his composition to have like views that are extremely interesting that I wouldn't feel comfortable nailing unless I photographed it.
Okay.
You know, but he can just pull that from his head and then do it.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't have that ability to think how would I place a figure behind a doorway, and then where would it be shot to make it the most interesting?
Okay.
If that makes any sense. I would have to figure that out on the spot and then photograph it, and then I can use the photograph for reference, and then I can do the perspective find there. But
right.
Whereas, like, if I'm going to shoot a human, I might have a better understanding of the angle I want to shoot them at. And I could stumble upon something better, but I have a better understanding of, like, how I would want the face, you know, like the angle of a nose or something like that to make it more paintable or whatever, you know,
right.
the how, where to point their eyes or something like that. All these like little things, the positioning of hands, all these things to like, that I'm like very intentional and kind of, I can direct a model based on that. I think perspective of like surroundings, I think, especially like indoors or anything that's going to like have, you know, more structure to it.
Okay.
I'm going to have more issues with, or not really issues, but I'm going to be, I can't push it as far as I want.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
I think so. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of like, I forget the painter who does like three people at like a table at like a fancy dinner. Or like someone at a Subway, I think they recently did.
Oh, maybe like Nick Alm?
Maybe. I don't know. But I feel like they use their surroundings very well.
Maybe not Nick Alm, because he doesn't do like a lot of... I mean, he paints people at fancy dinners sometimes, but I don't know if he does a lot with environments other than like just having a lot of figures in like a blank room almost.
Yeah, I think it was Nick Alm. But like maybe. Yeah, I think it was him. But yeah, there's not like much to it, but there's like just enough, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
To be like aware of the space without going too hard on the paint.
Yeah.
Because I also don't want like that I don't want like to paint a whole room.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
for sure.
But I want to like understand points and then use that to my to the best of its ability. I still think about it all the time, and I'm still learning. But it's like that's the whole thing of like, first of all, like one of the biggest things about being an artist is like learning how to see. And a lot of times the easiest way to explain that is by seeing colors, you know, or value. But I think a lot of that shit gets like composition obviously is like, it's almost like the blanket of all of that. So it's like how to see all of these things and how they interact at once.
Right.
And so like perspective is like, how do you see perspective in an interesting way? And you do that by like, I feel like artists in general, we always are like looking at shit and going like, oh, that's cool. Or like, oh,
right.
or whatever, whether it be someone's work or just like walking down the street and kind of just noticing things. And so that's one of those things that's like, you know, the way I work on it is just by looking at shit really.
Okay.
You know, I'm going like, oh, this perspective is pretty cool. And mushrooms helps a little bit. So try them or don't.
Yeah. Next on the list for me to do, I guess.
Have you done it before?
No, I'm curious about it.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I'd be interested if you did them. I'd be interested to see what you thought about if you went, because I mean, you can go any direction, but I'm curious if you went, like, if you thought about things in composition, if you would get any, like, interesting thoughts on that.
I don't know. You didn't, when you took them, that wasn't, like, what you went into it thinking about, right?
No, but what happens is like you see things, at least for me, you see things almost like a film.
Okay.
And so there's like this, things feel like not feel, they look different in that like if you go outside, it feels like everything's in HD, like everything's like extremely crisp.
Okay. Yeah.
But like say this room, right? Everything's like yellow lighting. And like everything's kind of like homey, so it feels very warm, and so it adds to how you see something. So it kind of feels like when I was in this room, it felt like, you know, like old, like how films before digital felt, you know, like a little bit fuzzy around the edges, a little warmer of a tone for a lot of things, like that kind of thing. So you start seeing things like that, and then you start focusing on how, like if you were a camera, where the best placement it is to see, like if you were to take that shot in a film, where would you have that angle?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And then you just start seeing everything like that, and then you go like, oh wow, like if I take a little step to the left, and then you become aware of like the lines of the ceiling, like to the like on my you just kind of can follow them through, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
like the perspective line, so you can see like like if I was to look at you and then pay attention or kind of be aware of like the perspective lines, then I could like step to the left or step to the right and go, okay, now here's the best shot for you with inside this room.
Right. Okay.
You know, rather than going like, what's the best shot of you, I would think of like everything in the entire composition of the shot.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense to me.
Which I don't think about that often. I usually think about only the figure and their lighting.
I see.
And then it's like, if I get a little perspective, I might use it or not. I don't know how we got there. Oh yeah, do mushrooms.
Just do mushrooms.
Yeah. I'd be interested. See what you thought after you did it.
Yeah. Maybe I'll get around to that.
Yeah. Your birthday is coming up, by the way.
That is true.
Is that it?
I think so. Getting close to not a mini set.
Oh, shit. Sorry, guys. One quick thing I wanted to say. I'm going to start a new national or worldwide holiday called Knock on Wood.
Okay.
It's to mark the year 2020. So talk to your congressman, talk to your prime minister, let them know. I don't know how these things grow, but I have this conspiracy theory for all you conspiratorial people that no one's going to each other's house anymore, so no one's knocking on their doors, which is causing us to be less lucky as human civilization. And so we need a national holiday where we all just knock on wood for an entire day. Do your part, people.
Plague is out there. It's like, dude, that's hella good.
But yeah. So don't forget to knock on wood.
All right.
I don't know what day that's going to be, but we'll set it once we get the ball rolling.
Yeah. These things just kind of fall into place once
Arborist Day could probably get like replaced by knock on wood day.
Yeah, exactly. There you
go. All right.
All right.
You close it, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, that's been another episode of Waiting to Dry. If you're still listening, careful with your heavy blue lights and maybe try shrooms.
Hell yeah.